In 1773, the Governor-General of India decided to establish an East India Company opium monopoly in Bengal. This so-called Patna opium was then the finest quality opium in the world, and it was grown for sale in the Chinese market. Indian tenant farmers were encouraged by the company to plant poppies and to sell the raw product to the company refineries near Calcutta, and production increased as the demand in Canton for opium grew. In 1793, the Qing government reiterated its long-standing prohibition on opium smoking, so the company became afraid to export it directly, and instead opium was sold to private traders, such as Jardine, Matheson and Company, who marketed the drug in Canton using their proceeds to fund the East India Company's trade in tea. And this trade in opium simply skyrocketed after the turn of the 19th century. You can measure it in chests of opium. Most of you have never seen a chest of opium. If you go to the Historical Museum in Hong Kong, in Kowloon, you can see one up close and personal. Each one weighs 145 pounds. And the trade in opium rose from about 5,000 of these chests in 1820 to over 18,000 by 1830. And then with the loss of the company's monopoly on this trade to 30,000 in 1835, 40,000 in 1839. It's difficult to say what this means in terms of actual opium addiction because it's tough to know how much every person actually consumed. But an English opium merchant, in a letter addressed to Lord Palmerston in 1840, estimated that the 40,000 chests of opium supplied to the Qing realm in that year supplied over 2 million customers out of a total Chinese population estimated at some, and probably an underestimation here, of some 350 million. And estimated that perhaps 1 in every 166 persons was thereby an addict. For the Qing government, the consequences, however, were worse than these statistics would suggest. Opium smoking seems to have been most prevalent among certain segments of the population: young and middle-aged men, civil servants, and soldiers. One Qing official estimated that opium smokers made up between 10 and 20% of the officials in the central government, 20 to 30% in local government, 50 to 60% of private secretaries and underlings. Some said in certain Qing banner armies that those who didn't smoke were the exceptions. The Jiaqing emperor in 1813 was surprised to discover that some of his imperial guards, as well as some eunuchs at court, had become opium addicts. And it was not just the Westerners who profited from opium. They made, in some cases, enormous fortunes, trading from heavily armed ships anchored outside of Canton in the mouth of the Pearl River. But their Chinese partners made money too. Those who transported the drug inland by small galleys and then eluded, or more commonly bribed, police officials as they unloaded the stuff upriver. Merchants from all over South China came to Canton at regular intervals, and a vast illegal distribution network moved the opium up the Pearl River through the canal networks of southern China to the Yangtze and even to the heartland of the North China Plain. Wherever in the world there is wide-scale drug trafficking, comes also official corruption. According to an imperial edict, public servants were to be promoted and rewarded if they captured a very specific amount of opium. It was said that the Governor-General of Guangdong, Guangxi, had made an agreement with smugglers in which he would be given on a regular basis a few hundred chests of opium, which he could then say he seized and could hand over to the authorities, claiming that they'd been captured by his police, whereas a much larger amount would go unseized. Now, on the Western side, there were some serious misgivings about this drug traffic. Public opinion in Britain seemed largely against it. Missionaries in Canton wrote home about the toll taken by Chinese opium addiction on Chinese society. But the dealers argued that they were supplying a product that the Chinese wanted, forgetting to mention that they often gave out free samples to encourage addiction. The British government, for its part, did nothing to stop the trafficking. because once again, it was the opium that bought the tea, that paid the duties of the British Crown, and in the 1830s, accounting for 1/3 of England's national revenue. Now, if nothing else, official Chinese prejudices about these barbarians could only be confirmed by this vast drug traffic and addiction. Opium was estimated to have made over 100,000 people addicts in the city of Suzhou in central China. And it was material evidence of a new kind of foreign menace, a barbarian poison.